If you're talking about it, I'll be talking about it. Dennis Prager here. Join me this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. And so just a note, since we were talking about the acquittal of Kate Steinle's killer, he mazed Zarate may still face federal charges. He can be charged for illegally possessing that firearm that carries a felony that carries up to 10 years in prison at the federal level.
Yeah.
So,
and he did steal it, allegedly, from a federal agent who left his car unlocked.
Which is the source of a civil action by the Steinle family against the federal government. But
and that would give him 10 more years in federal prison?
Potentially. But obviously that still doesn't explain away the controversy of that jury verdict and politics infusing itself into a criminal law decision. Some people are saying this is conservatives' Trayvon Martin case. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's real simple. The rule of law should control in a criminal proceeding. And so the rule of law led to an acquittal in the Trayvon Martin case, which was appropriate largely because of the stand your ground law in Florida and the particular facts of that case. And you'll recall the jury members in the Trayvon Martin case, the George Zimmerman case, some of them crying, saying, I wanted to convict him, but I couldn't under the law. That's a jury that did its job. This is a jury based on what we know and what Zarate's criminal defense attorney has said, and the defense they offered was about litigating the politics of immigration policy. Mm-hmm. Totally different things. One case, the rule of law controlled, and that was appropriate. In this case, the rule of law should have controlled, and it didn't. This is not conservative liberal. This is rule of law versus the arbitrary and capricious rule of politically motivated men. Okay, for more on this topic, as well as are Republicans going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as is their wont on tax cuts, we're pleased to be joined by Matthew Continetti. He's the editor of the Washington Free Beacon and a contributing editor to the Weekly Standard. Matthew, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Morning. So why don't we start with the Senate delay? Does that delay mean tax cuts will be denied?
Unclear. There's still, I think, a lot of momentum behind the tax bill in the Senate and in the Congress generally because Republicans want to end the year with at least one major legislative victory. And I think that's kind of been driving this process from the very beginning. But, there are two holdouts, really, it seems to me. You have Senator Corker, you have Senator Flake, and then you have a third possible holdout in Senator Langford. And their concern is the deficit. And the interesting thing to me is Corker and Flake, of course, also have a personal grudge against the president.
When did they become deficit hawks? I mean, really.
Right.
This is very convenient timing for them.
So it would be ironic if that personal fight that kind of broke out on Twitter and in the public in recent months is the dagger in the back of tax reform. Though I still think more likely than not, the Senate will find a way to pass a bill.
Well, the good news is McCain's on board and Susan Collins.
That's right, and Lisa Murkowski. And so you see here, I think the McCain decision was probably the most important because it was, his opinion does carry some weight among Republican senators, and he was really the person who scuttled the Obamacare repeal earlier this summer. So he decided that he was not going to be that man again. And I think that did carry some weight. I mean, the bill is very complex, as you guys know. But, there are some things in there that will be conservative victories. Among them, the individual mandate repeal, and also something that conservatives have wanted for more than a decade, and that is opening up parts of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. And so that's one reason why Senator Murkowski, I think, is supportive as well.
Just continuing Senate politics, Charles Lipson over at University of Chicago had a good piece on this. We've discussed it as well. It's not particularly a unique opinion, but it seems to be one that the evidence is mounting to support. and that is Roy Moore's best friend right now, politically, Nancy Pelosi. And that's because of her, kind of middling defense of iconic John Conyers, who now, as of yesterday, has to resign, and all the problems on the left between Conyers and Franken and in the media and in Hollywood that are sort of pushing more out of the headlines and limiting the standing Democrats have to try and put him in the headlines.
Or even put tax reform in the headlines, right? I mean,
yeah,
you
true.
Expect the Democrats to really be rallying their base and go after these tax cuts, but they haven't been able to for precisely the reason you say. The sexual misconduct issue has kind of exploded in the Democrats' hands here, and so not only have they is Pelosi kind of embarrassed herself with her initial reaction to Conyers and now her flip to calling for him to resign. But on the Senate side, you have the Al Franken situation where I'm not sure any Democrat senator really knows what to do. And meanwhile, the accusations against Franken continue to mount. So for these reasons, the Democrats are occupied by sexual misconduct when, in fact, they should be kind of rallying the base against the tax plan and preparing for what just a few weeks ago looked like was going to be a good midterm for the Democrats. But right now, they are kind of running in every direction, trying to figure out a way to deal with this kind of frenzy of sexual harassment claims.
But I mean, just to close, but I mean, Roy Moore right now, and I thought I left him for dead after the Lee Korfman interview on the Today Show, of all places, the Today Show. But all the recent polls have him up, and it seems like a lot of Alabama Republicans, which is most Alabamans, are sort of reluctantly coming home.
Well, I think for Judge Moore, less than Nancy Pelosi, the big factor is his opponent, Doug Jones. And Jones is a Democrat there in Alabama, but he's not a conservative Democrat. Mm-hmm. He's pro-choice and quite pro-choice, and he's pretty much liberal on most other issues. That has helped Moore because it hasn't given those wavering Republicans kind of a reason to say, you know what, I'm uncomfortable voting for Moore because of the allegations against him, and, this guy Doug Jones, he's not that bad. Well, in fact, when they look at Doug Jones, if you're a conservative Republican, he's pretty bad. And so I think that's helped solidify the support for Moore in a very, let's be clear, a very, very red state.
Yeah, and President Trump next week, he's going to be, he's making a stop in Pensacola, Florida, which is in Mobile, Alabama's television market. So he's, similar to endorsing him, but yet he's a state away, but it's still going to be seen by Alabamans.
He's not campaigning for him, he's campaigning near him.
Right, literally, it's in the same TV market.
And less campaigning for him than campaigning against Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, you notice what Trump has said, and it's less about Moore, who, remember, President Trump did not support in the primary. He's always been somewhat leery of Moore. It's less about Moore and more about Jones and how Jones would be another vote for Schumer, basically, in the Senate. And I think for Republicans who are interested in the tax bill, who are interested in especially judicial nominations and potential upcoming Supreme Court retirements, that vote counts for a lot. And so if Trump does mention that race when he's in Pensacola, I think he'll be less pro-Moore than anti-Jones.
Yeah, you wrote a very good piece that was widely circulated about the importance of freedom, just people reflecting over the Thanksgiving holiday about this country and our freedom, so many of which are under assault. We had David French on yesterday who recounted an excellent piece he wrote in National Review about his deployment 10 years ago this past Thanksgiving to Iraq and the perspective that provided him. Well, why did you feel the need, I guess concurrent with the New York Times remembering the wonders of 100 years of communism over the last several months, why did you feel the need to opine on the importance of our liberties?
Well, I was struck by this amazing story of the North Korean defector that happened just a few days before our Thanksgiving holiday. And this was a staff sergeant in the North Korean Army who commandeered a Jeep and then had to flee on foot across the line of control into the Republic of Korea, our democratic ally in the South. And whilst he was fleeing his country, North Korean soldiers fired on him and shot him 5 times, I believe. And thanks to the wonders of capitalist medicine in the South, and because of the quick reaction of South Korean troops and also U.S. troops were involved in his rescue, this defector is surviving and looks to be on his way to a full recovery. And to me, as I read this story about the North Korean defector, it struck me that that people only run in one direction from communism, and that's away. If you look at the history of communism, it's always people wanting to get away. They're never trying to get in. You don't see people running in the other direction across the line of control.
Trying to break into East Germany, right.
Exactly. And to me, that just shows the power and importance of freedom and the dignity of every individual life. And that's something I think that I'm, of course, very concerned about. And yet I see, when I read and go online, I see people on both the left and the right kind of downgrade this idea of freedom or be cynical about it. And I think stories like the North Korean defector remind us that it's something that we need to be proud of.
All right. He is Matthew Continetti, editor of the Washington Free Beacon, contributing editor to the Weekly Standard. Matthew, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch.